Clayton Reeves thought he'd bought peace for a mere $100 in an abandoned ranch on the edge of nowhere where no one would bother him again. But when he arrived, the porch was not empty. 3 towering women in prairie dresses waited for him, their presence as heavy as the heat rising off the land. And when they told him they were each 600 pounds and fertile, Clayton realized this wasn't the fresh start he'd planned. It was a life-altering trap. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if stories like this pull you in as much as they do us, hit that subscribe button right now because the next chapter takes this story to a whole new level you won't want to miss. Clayton Reeves had imagined silence. That was the fantasy. Just him, the dust, and a stretch of land so wide it swallowed his past whole. The wind would carry nothing but the sound of his own breath. No creditors, no family expectations, no voices reminding him of the man he used to be. Just a $100 deed, signed in shaky ink, and a promise that this was his land now, a rugged piece of nowhere where no one would bother him again. But as his horse clopped past the last weathered fence post and the cabin came into full view, he felt the first flicker of dread. 3 women stood on the porch, massive women, their forms taking up so much space they seemed part of the structure itself. Each one was dressed in a solid-colored prairie gown, brown, pink, and blue, the fabric stretched tight across their round frames. Their cheeks were flushed from the sun, their arms thick and bare, and their expressions expectant. He reined in his horse, boots crunching on dry grass as he dismounted slowly, keeping his voice even. "I think there's been a mistake." The one in the brown dress stepped forward. She was the largest of the 3, with golden hair coiled over her shoulder like a rope and eyes the color of storm clouds. "No mistake," she said calmly. Her voice was smooth, deep, and unfazed. "You're Clayton Reeves. We've been waiting on you." Clayton's grip tightened around the rolled-up deed in his hand. "I bought this place, sight unseen, from a man named Lester Briggs." The one in blue gave a little laugh, not mocking, just amused. "Oh, Lester, that old goat. He told us you might be coming. Didn't say you'd be so tense." "I'm not tense," Clayton muttered, suddenly very aware of the way the sunlight reflected off his sweaty shirt. "I just wasn't expecting anyone." The woman in pink spoke then, the smallest of the 3, though still easily twice his size. Her smile was open, soft. "We're each 600 pounds, she said without shame or apology. "And fertile." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Clayton blinked. "Excuse me?" The woman in the brown dress, clearly the leader, stepped closer. Her presence was overwhelming, her shadow stretching across his boots. "This land comes with expectations. We've held up our end, living here, working it, waiting. Now it's your turn." Clayton stared up at them, heart pounding with confusion, disbelief, and something else he didn't want to name just yet. The porch creaked behind them, the horizon swam in heat waves, and the weight of the moment settled over him like a second Sunday. He had come looking for quiet, but quiet was no longer an option. Clayton didn't move right away. The wind shifted, pushing the scent of sun-warmed wood and wild sage into his nose. His mind scrambled for some rational explanation, some bureaucratic mix-up. Maybe these women were caretakers, maybe squatters, but their calm confidence made him doubt that. They weren't surprised to see him. If anything, they looked like they'd been waiting a long time. The woman in brown gestured toward the porch. "Come inside. We'll talk. I'm not going anywhere until someone explains what the hell is going on," Clayton said, his voice sharper than he intended. He wasn't used to being caught off guard, not anymore. The one in pink stepped forward, hands gently clasped in front of her belly. "We understand it's a lot. Lester said you'd be stubborn. That old bastard didn't say anything about 3 women already living here, because he sold you more than land," said the woman in blue. "He sold you his arrangement, and his debt." Clayton frowned. "Debt?" The woman in brown let out a low sigh, folding her arms across her massive chest. "Lester Briggs didn't just leave behind a deed. He left behind a promise, one that came with a certain understanding." She reached behind the porch railing and pulled out a thick envelope, yellowed at the edges. Inside was a folded contract, stamped, notarized, and he realized with a jolt bearing Lester's unmistakable signature. Clayton scanned the first few lines, his throat tightening. "Upon transfer of land ownership, the inheriting party shall assume all cooperative duties and relational obligations in full." "What the hell does relational obligations mean?" he asked, his voice cracking with disbelief. "It means," the woman in brown said evenly, "you're part of this now. We worked this land with Lester. He promised us a future. When he backed out, he promised us the next man would follow through. Clayton took a step back, heart pounding. This is insane. No one can promise another man's life. The woman in pink looked down, visibly pained. You think we want to force someone to stay who doesn't want to be here? You think we asked for this? Her voice trembled, but she didn't break. We've kept this place alive, fed it, built it, and all we ever wanted was a partner. Her words hit something in him. He didn't expect something that had been dormant and dust-covered for years. He looked at them again, really looked. The brown-dressed woman with quiet command. The pink one, tender and fragile. The blue one, proud and watchful. He'd come here with no one waiting for him. Nothing behind, nothing ahead. Now, 3 women were offering him something he couldn't define, but it felt real. Still, he clenched the deed tighter in his hand. This doesn't make it legal. No, said the one in brown. But it makes it ours, and somehow, that felt heavier than any law. Clayton sat at the edge of the porch, the envelope heavy in his hands, even heavier in meaning. The wind stirred lazily through the grass, but the stillness between him and the women remained tense, not hostile, but weighted, like everyone was holding their breath. The contract lay open in his lap. He'd read it twice now, trying to find the part that made it all some big misunderstanding. But there was no loophole. The language was vague, yes, but intentionally so. Cooperative duties, relational obligations, mutual sustainability. He looked up, eyes narrowing. This reads like a partnership agreement, not a marriage contract. Not whatever you're suggesting. We're not suggesting anything. The woman in brown replied calmly. We're stating facts. Name's Elna, she added after a moment, softening. The one in pink is Maisie. And that's June, she said, nodding toward the woman in blue. The names felt too normal for the situation, which somehow made it all more surreal. Clayton stood, brushing dust off his pants. So let me get this straight. Lester signed this nonsense, then bailed and dumped the whole mess on me? Maisie's hands clutched her dress. He didn't just bail. He sold the ranch to get away from his own promises. From us. Clayton raised an eyebrow. And what were those promises exactly? To live here, June said bluntly. To work the land with us. Build a future. Share a home. Possibly. A family. Clayton stared at her. He was supposed to. What? Father your children? Elna didn't flinch. That was the idea. The silence stretched thin and tight between them. You really expect me to pick up where he left off? Clayton asked, voice rough. We don't expect anything, Elna said, stepping forward. But we've held up our end. We didn't leave. We didn't fold. We kept this place alive through drought, frost, and loneliness. Her voice cracked only slightly. And now, like it or not, that contract has your name on it in ink, if not in spirit. He shook his head, trying to swallow the heat building in his chest. I came here for peace, not to play house with strangers who think I owe them my body. Maisie flinched, but June stepped in. We're not asking for your body. We're asking for your time, your work, maybe, eventually, your heart, but only if it's freely given. Clayton paced the porch, the weight of choice suddenly bearing down on him. He could leave, ride off before sundown, pretend this never happened. The deed was legally his. No sheriff would fault him. But as he glanced back at the 3 women, Elna standing tall, June meeting his eyes without blinking, and Maisie clutching hope like a lifeline, the idea of leaving started to feel like its own kind of prison. He didn't answer. Not yet. But he didn't walk away either. Night came fast on the prairie. With no city lights to stretch out the twilight, the sky dimmed quick and clean, leaving only the hush of wind and the crackle of a fire Elna had started in the pit out back. Clayton hadn't left. Not yet. He'd unsaddled his horse, brushed it down by hand, and tied it loosely by the barn. He told himself it was temporary just until sunrise, but when the women invited him to sit by the fire, something made him nod. They didn't press him, they didn't corner him or revisit the contract. Instead, they passed him a tin plate of beans and roasted squash and sat nearby, all 3 in a triangle formation like a circle with an open end, just wide enough for him to join or refuse. He ate in silence, unsure if the tension in his chest was fear or something more complicated. You still think we're trying to trap you, June said quietly. Clayton looked up. The fire lit her face from beneath, casting shadows that made her cheekbones sharp, her eyes unreadable. I don't know what to think, he admitted. You talk about obligations like I'm part of some livestock deal. That's fair, Elna replied. We came on too strong. But when you've been waiting a long time, sometimes the first words out your mouth come out heavier than they should. Maisie hadn't said much since earlier. She poked at the fire with a stick, her brows drawn together. We ain't desperate, if that's what you're thinking. Just tired of being left. Clayton lowered his plate, voice softer now. How long were you with Lester? 18 months, June said. And he was here maybe half of that, Elna added. He'd talk big. Plans, crops, babies. Said all the right things. And then he got cold when the soil got hard. And you three just what? Shared him? The question slipped out harsher than he intended. Elna didn't flinch. We shared the work. We shared the weight. What grew between us wasn't about convenience. It was about survival. Love grows strange when the world forgets about you. That silenced him. The fire popped. A distant coyote howled. The women didn't react. Clayton found himself staring at Maisie, her face lit with soft gold, shadows hiding the deeper lines of grief etched beneath her cheeks. She looked tired, not just in her body but her spirit. We don't want a prisoner, Elna said after a long pause. We want a partner, one who stays. Clayton leaned back, bones aching from the saddle and the weight of too many decisions. What if I don't know what I want? Maisie finally looked up. Then stay long enough to find out. And that was the thing, wasn't it? He could leave in the morning, no questions asked. But something about the firelight, the unspoken wounds, and the hope he saw blinking behind their exhaustion made turning away feel cowardly. For tonight, at least, he stayed. The morning sun poured over the ranch like honey, thick and golden, catching on the tall grass and the steam rising off the coffee Elna handed him without a word. Clayton took it, nodding a quiet thanks. His back ached from sleeping on a pile of blankets inside the barn, but his mind ached more full of questions, choices, memories that stirred like dust in a storm. The women had gone about their chores without fanfare. June hauled water. Elna chopped wood. Maisie was in the garden, humming to herself, her pink dress fluttering in the breeze as she crouched among rows of beans and squash. Something about that hum felt like an invitation, so when Clayton finished his coffee, he walked over slow, uncertain, like approaching a wild animal you're not sure will bolt or bite. Maisie looked up and smiled without surprise. Mornin'. He scratched the back of his neck. Need help? She blinked once, then nodded. Grab the bucket? He filled it from the rain barrel and brought it over, settling on his haunches beside her as she worked. Her hands moved gently through the soil, patting it like she was tucking it in. These beans were supposed to feed 4, she said after a while, eyes on the earth. Not 3. Clayton hesitated. You think I belong in that 4th slot? Maisie shrugged. I think we've been waiting for someone who wouldn't just pass through. Elna keeps a strong face. June keeps her distance. But me? I believe in signs. Gut feelings. He looked at her. And what does your gut say about me? She met his gaze, soft, open, with no challenge in it. That you're scared, but not cruel. And that maybe you're lonelier than we are. That caught him off guard. He tried to laugh it off, but it stuck in his throat. You know what scares me most? He asked quietly. Not that you're all expecting me to stay. It's that part of me wants to. Maisie sat back on her heels. We're not looking for a fantasy, Clayton. Not a savior. Just someone who doesn't run when it gets heavy. He stared at her, the pink dress faded at the seams, her face flushed with sun and sincerity. She wasn't begging. She was offering something steady, something real. You think it'd work? He asked. I think it could, she replied. Not if you fake it. Not if you're here out of guilt. But if you stay long enough to know us, not just the idea of us, then yeah, I think it could work. The wind kicked up gently, carrying the smell of wet soil and something floral her, maybe. It wrapped around him like a thread. For the first time, he didn't feel like a man trapped on someone else's land. He felt rooted. By the 4th day, Clayton had memorized the creak of the porch steps, the rhythm of Elna's axe hitting wood, and the way June always finished her tasks 5 minutes after everyone else, like she didn't want to linger too long in shared silence. The rhythm of the ranch was strange but not unpleasant. He found himself falling into it, even if he still hadn't unpacked his saddlebags. That morning, something shifted. Elna was at the stove cooking cornbread. Maisie was sweeping the floor. June stood by the window, arms folded, staring out toward the barn. The air felt tight, like something unspoken had been building and finally reached the edges of the room. You planning on sleeping in that barn forever? Elna asked, not turning from the pan. Clayton wiped his hands on his pants. Didn't seem right to take a bed I wasn't sure I'd earned yet. Elna's head tilted slightly, just enough to show she'd heard the nuance. And how do you plan to earn it? June asked, turning from the window. Her tone wasn't angry, but it wasn't soft either. He sighed. I don't know. That's the problem, isn't it? Maisie paused with the broom, gaze flicking between them. Maybe it's not about knowing. Maybe it's about deciding. June stepped forward, eyes sharp. You say you want to help, want to understand us, but you're still hovering like a man waiting for the next train out. Clayton straightened. I'm not trying to mislead anyone. I never asked to be part of this. No, Elna said, finally turning. But you didn't leave either. That hit harder than he expected. She was right. His horse still stood saddled most nights. He kept saying he hadn't made a choice, but every time he stayed, he was choosing something. Or someone. You think I'm just dragging this out? He asked. We think you're scared, Maisie said gently. He looked down, jaw tight. I've made decisions before that cost me everything. I'm not eager to gamble again. June's voice softened. We're not asking for a bet. Just presence. Full presence. Either you're in, or you're out. But limbo? That's no good for anyone. End of friff. Clayton swallowed hard, staring at the wooden floor beneath his boots. He'd come to this ranch thinking he could disappear. Now 3 women scarred, grounded, and unflinchingly real were asking him to be seen. Maisie moved toward him, her broom forgotten. We don't want you scared, Clayton. We want you sure. And for the first time, he realized the pressure wasn't coming from them. It was coming from the part of him that wanted to run. Not because he didn't care, but because he did. And caring again. That was the riskiest thing of all. The storm rolled in without warning. One moment, the sky was nothing but high blue openness. The next, clouds churned like boiling tar and the air grew thick with the scent of rain and electricity. Clayton had just crossed the field to check the north fence when the wind snapped hard enough to nearly knock him sideways. He hurried to pull the gate closed, lashing it with rope before sprinting back toward the barn, but the mud caught him mid-stride. His boot slid out. The world tilted. His body hit the ground with a jolt that sent pain screaming up his leg. He cursed, rolled, and tried to stand. Lightning forked across the sky. The pain in his knee flared red-hot. He collapsed again, teeth clenched. By the time Elna and Maisie found him, the rain was coming down in heavy sheets. They didn't speak, just moved. Elna crouched at his side, water sliding off her arms like armor, and Maisie pulled his arm around her shoulder. They lifted him together, their strength effortless, his weight a feather between them, and for the first time, he didn't feel emasculated by their power. He felt held. Inside the house, June had already pulled towels from a drawer and a jar of something that smelled sharp and minty. Clayton sat on the edge of the bed, Maisie's bed. He realized while Elna carefully peeled off his soaked boot. He winced, breath shallow. It's not broken, she said after examining it. Just twisted. Bad though. You won't be walking on it for days. Clayton leaned back, frustration knotting in his gut. Perfect. Maisie knelt beside him, patting his arm. It's all right. You'll heal. I should be out there helping. You're here now, Elna said. Let us help you. That landed harder than it should have. He wasn't used to being cared for, not without strings, not without shame. June dabbed at the swelling with a cool cloth, her touch surprisingly gentle. Rest tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure things out. He nodded, eyes drifting closed for a moment. Later, in the quiet dark, he lay alone in Maisie's bed, the sheets smelling faintly of lavender and sunlight. His leg throbbed, but not as much as his thoughts. The walls of the house creaked with wind. Somewhere down the hall, the women's voices murmured low, not arguing, just talking. Together, in rhythm. He'd watched them move through the world with a grace he didn't expect. They were soft and strong, blunt and nurturing. He didn't know which part pulled him in more. But what scared him most was this. He didn't want to leave anymore. And that want, that real, hungry want, felt heavier than the weight of any contract. The next morning came slow and gold, bleeding warmth across the wooden floorboards and into the corners of the house. Clayton stirred beneath a quilt that wasn't his, in a bed he still wasn't sure he deserved. His leg ached dull and deep, but he could move it now. That felt like something. He tried to rise, but the moment he shifted, Elna appeared in the doorway like a shadow conjured by thought. She carried a tray with fresh bread, 2 boiled eggs, and a mug of tea that steamed sweet and herbal. Stay put, she said, setting it down. Work'll be there when you're ready. I hate being useless, he muttered, reaching for the tea. You're not useless, she replied. You're just healing. He looked up at her. That bed down the hall, the one I've been in. It's Maisie's, right? Elna nodded. Was. We offered it. She said she'd rather you be comfortable. She didn't have to do that. She wanted to. Clayton took a sip, the warmth of the tea sinking into him like truth. You all talk like you've made peace with this setup. What setup? Elna asked, lifting a brow. This arrangement. 1 man, 3 women. Elna stepped closer, folding her arms not in defiance, but in thought. We've had time to think about it. And the truth is, we were never looking for traditional. Not out here. Not after what life's already taken. He nodded, slowly. And you think I fit into that? Elna studied him carefully. You fit if you say you fit. That night, when the dishes were done and the windows shut tight against the wind, Clayton walked with a limp to the main room, where the fire still glowed in the hearth. Maisie sat on the couch, feet curled beneath her, reading a tattered book. June stitched a rip in a canvas bag. Elna stood at the stove, wiping it clean even though it already shone. He cleared his throat. I've been thinking. 3 pairs of eyes turned toward him. I didn't come here to be part of anyone's future. But I also didn't expect to be wanted. Not for my name, not for my money. Just wanted. June set her stitching aside. And? He looked at each of them, one by one. I don't know if I'm enough for the 3 of you, but I want to try. Maisie smiled, soft and stunned, like she'd been holding her breath for days. Elna didn't smile, she nodded. June stood and walked over, pressing a kiss to his cheek without ceremony. We already made room, she whispered. Later, when they led him down the hall past his old room, past the one he'd borrowed, and into a larger space with a new-built bed wide as a wagon and sturdy as a barn beam, he understood what she meant. They hadn't just prepared a bed, they'd prepared a life, and now it had space for him. The storm returned 2 nights later, less violent than the last, but loud enough to rattle the windows and shake loose memories Clayton had tried to forget. Thunder rolled low across the hills, echoing through the walls like a growl from something ancient. He lay in the big bed, the one they'd built together, with Maisie curled against his side and Elna's arm draped across his chest. June had fallen asleep in the armchair by the hearth, book still open in her lap. He didn't feel overwhelmed anymore. He felt surrounded. For once, the noise outside didn't bother him. It was the quiet inside that spoke loudest. They didn't press him with more questions. They didn't demand words. But still, he knew the time had come to say them. He slid out of bed quietly and limped into the main room. June stirred when he approached, blinking away sleep. Everything all right? She whispered. Clayton crouched beside her chair, his knee protesting but not enough to stop him. I need you to know something, he said. Her face softened in the dim firelight. I'm staying, he said. Not because of the deed, not because of Lester, because I want to. She closed the book slowly. You sure? He nodded. I've spent so long trying to live for myself, I forgot what it feels like to live with someone, or for something bigger than just getting by. A pause passed between them, and then June reached out and touched his face. We were ready to let you go if that's what you needed, but we hoped you'd choose this. I do, he said, voice thick. I already have. By the next morning, everything changed, not in the loud, cinematic way that men sometimes imagine, but in the way real change always comes. Quietly, then all at once. Clayton moved through the house with purpose now. He helped Elna with the coop repairs, sat beside Maisie while she wrote out the planting calendar, and even teased June when she overseasoned the stew. The fear hadn't vanished, but it no longer controlled him. That afternoon, the 4 of them sat around the kitchen table, maps and papers spread before them. Trade routes, water lines, expansion plans. We should dig another well before the dry season hits, Elna said. And a second garden, Maisie added. We've got the help now. Clayton grinned. Yeah. Put the new guy to work. June smirked. You're not the new guy anymore. He looked around the table at these women who had every reason to mistrust, to guard, to push him away, and realized he'd been wrong about what it meant to find home. It wasn't about walls or solitude or distance from the past. It was about the people who met you at your weakest and gave you reason to stay strong. 3 months later, the ranch was different. The fences were straighter, the fields wider, the house warmer. But it wasn't just the work that had changed things, it was the rhythm. 4 people moving through the days like chords in the same song. never identical but always in harmony. Clayton stood by the fence at sunrise, a mug of coffee in his hands, watching June and Maisie tend to the hens while Elna hauled feed like a living ox. The scent of morning dew and cut hay filled the air. It felt permanent, like time had finally let him be still. Behind him, the porch creaked. "You're up early," Elna said, stepping beside him. "Hard to sleep when everything feels right," he replied. She glanced at him sideways. That sounded dangerously close to contentment. He smiled. "Don't spread it around. I've got a reputation to maintain." She chuckled, then turned serious. "You ever regret staying?" Clayton thought about it. Really thought. About the loneliness he'd carried like a badge. About the fear he felt that first day of them, of himself. About the weight of what they'd offered, and what he'd finally accepted. "No," he said. "Not once." The bed they'd built together had become more than a place to sleep. It was where Elna's hands rested against his ribs after long days, where Maisie whispered ideas for spring planting in the dark, where June leaned against his shoulder with quiet thoughts about the future. It wasn't always easy, they argued sometimes, like all people do. But even the conflict was honest. Earned. They'd made rules. Some spoken, some not. They rotated space, shared burdens, respected silence. And slowly, the strangest thing happened. The world beyond the ranch stopped mattering. They became their own world. One night, while watching the fire dance in the hearth, Maisie had said it plain. "People wouldn't understand what we've got here." And Clayton had replied, "Good thing we didn't build it for them." The locals whispered, of course. 4 adults under one roof, sharing one life. But no one dared challenge them, not after Clayton stood his ground in town. Not after word spread of how successful the ranch had become. Love, he realized, didn't need to fit inside the lines someone else had drawn. It just needed roots. And these women had given him the deepest ones he'd ever known. As the sun crested the hills and spilled gold over the land, June called out from the porch, "Breakfast's ready." Clayton turned to Elna. "Race you?" She raised an eyebrow. "With that limp?" He grinned. "It's getting better." They walked back to the house slow, easy, together. And as they crossed the threshold, into the warmth and the chaos and the life they'd made, Clayton felt the final piece of his old self fall away. He hadn't just stayed. He'd become part of something. Something heavier. Something richer. Something real.